Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder, and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. And today we're doing an interview, another one with I'm going to say it slowly because I really want to get her name correctly, but here with Natalia Staniszewska. Awesome.
Yeah, that was great, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, she's a wonderful gal, very patient with me. And I also met her on Instagram, but she has an awesome profile on there. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring her on. But I'm going to tell you guys, she is an MS of neuroscience and a nutritionist originally from Poland, currently living in the Netherlands. In her work, she combines the knowledge of neuroscience with holistic approach to promoting good brain health. Her social media presence is dedicated to helping people with eating disorders, especially binge eating disorders. And you can find her on her Instagram at binge nutrition. And I'll link all of those in the show notes below, but I love her concepts on some things, and that's why I wanted to bring her on. So Natalia, let's just start out with, what's your background? Tell us a bit about your story. How'd you fall into the science of binge eating and things like that?
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very glad that I was invited here to share my story or share a little bit of tips about binge eating. So yes, unfortunately, I've been struggling with binge eating for I had been struggling with binge eating for a couple of years, and I'm not sure even how it started. I guess that I when I was a kid. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my story. I think that I was always soothed by food with food by my parents. I would say that in my household we never really expressed emotions in like saying each other like we love each other or like hugging each other, but we would give each other food. So I was always like rewarded with food. So I had a huge like emotional attachment to food. But the real problem started, I think, at my university when I wanted to lose some weight, because I've noticed that my roommate was slimmer and I wanted to do that as well. So I just started to controlling my calories, my portions. And when I came back home from the university, because because of the holiday break, I think this is the moment when I developed. Then I had my first depression episode, and in my case, depression was always connected to my eating problems. So whenever I would be depressed, I would be also turning towards food to better myself. So I think this is how it started. So my first binge eating episodes were because I was very low, because I had very low mood, and it was connected to depression. And this is the first time I started purging. However, it didn't stick to me. I wasn't very good at it, let's say it that way. So I only binged. Yes, and I actually, after a couple of months of that kind of behavior, I decided to go vegan because of few reasons. Because I loved animals, because I also had a horrible acne because of also binging, and I wanted to ditch dairy. And the third reason was because I knew that if I will tell myself that if I will find a good reason not to eat cookies, and the good reason enough was that they contain, I don't know, dairy or they contain eggs, that I know that I won't eat them. So it actually worked for it. It's surprising, but thanks to vegan diet, at first I was able to stop binge eating, because back then in Poland there wasn't many junk foods. So actually, I just started eating healthier, started to take better care of myself, and the problem sort of disappeared. Of course, at the beginning, I still had urges to binge, so I would binge on healthy foods, but then I wasn't as guilty about it. So this is the natural process of binge eating disappearing, right? First, the binges were smaller, then they appeared less often. Unfortunately, because of my vegan diet, I become very very thin, and I suffered from hypothalamic amenorrhea, which means that I didn't have my period and I was very, very thin. So I
Mhm.
decided to go on a journey of gaining weight and also gaining my period back. And this is the moment when I also moved abroad to study at a university in the Netherlands. And um, and when I lived in Netherlands, you can find in the Dutch shops you could find much more junk food. So I started eating more processed foods. And at the beginning, I just allowed myself to do that because I knew that I have to gain weight, and I was okay with eating processed foods. It wasn't a problem for me because, as I said, I wanted to gain weight and get my period back. However, the old patterns in my brain were evoked, I would say, and slowly my eating junk food became, overeating on junk food and then binge eating. So by the time I got my period back, I also, gained a lot of weight. Again, I started suffering with acne, and after a few months of doing that, my health was just in a horrible state. I was all very, very bloated, very puffy on my face. Again, acne, weight gain. Then after this year, uh, living abroad, I came back home, and again, I was depressed. I was in horrible state, and everything just just piled up. And yes, so this is the way I sort of had my binge eating comeback of my problem. And the second time I just had to deal with it differently because I was still vegan, right? So going vegan again won't help me because I'm still vegan. So I just had to find different ways to do that. And because I was studying neuroscience, I just started to dig deeper into science of eating and how can I help myself. And I started to understand that this is just a habit, and also that processed foods are unfortunately highly addictive for me. And I just had to find new ways of learning how to eat normally, and that happened a little bit through intuitive eating, but also mindful eating and habit change and managing my mental health. So that would be my story. I hope that maybe some of you could relate, because I know that that some stories of how binge eating started, they are sort of similar to each other. So I wonder if anyone from the audience could relate to what I said.
No, I'm sure a lot of my audience can relate to what you said. I mean, a lot of my audience, they suffer mainly from bulimia, but a lot of it, I think we were talking about this before, it's the binging and then that triggers the bulimia as well. So like the purging. So it's a huge component of it. And I think how you said I've been taking notes, so if you like see me look down, that's what I'm doing. But so I like that you went through, obviously, I was very similar in college. I kind of started feeling self conscious about my body, and then I tried to lose weight, and then the restriction eventually led to binging, right? And uncontrollableness. But it's interesting that you were able to stop it with a vegan diet at first.
Yeah,
And even though that made a lot of positive health changes in your life, it still was kind of like putting a band aid over the problem. So I'm really
yeah,
curious. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of habit change in neuroscience and the fact that they're just pathways in our brain, and you have the ability to rewrite them. But I
yeah.
want to hear specifically how you were able to stop binging through that process.
You mean the second time when I relapsed and how I
Yeah.
stopped binging the second time? Yeah, I think that I also have in my brain some kind of like neural associations, like patterns. For example, my binge eating would get way worse when I would be at home, right? Because my brain remembered that few years ago I also overeat in the in my house, in my parents' house. So for me, the very important part was just moving out. And actually, it's quite a story because I was unemployed, and I didn't have any plan for my future. So for a few months, I rented a house very near my parents' house. Then I moved to my grandma. It's hilarious what I did to just break the association patterns in my brain. And maybe for me it was slightly easier because, yeah, I actually like to eat healthy. So it was easier for me when I could sort of manage what I bring home, what kind of food I bring home. And I have to say that at the beginning I didn't eat too much. I didn't eat too much trigger foods. Trigger foods came back to my diet only after a few months, and right now I am surrounded with trigger foods because I'm living with my partner who is junk food eater, and we have to have always open chocolate or open cookies in the house, so it's not a problem. But at the beginning, unfortunately, I had to ditch the processed food and sort of learn my hunger cues with by eating foods that are satiating, like vegetables, fruits. And I had to stop eating like highly processed foods because I knew that they screw up my hunger cues. Because then, if I, however much cookies I ate, I felt like I'm still I'm still not full, no satiated. Um, so that was the one thing, like switching to a healthier diet. And another thing was, for example, mindful eating. Like I had to learn to stop the autopilot in my brain, to just stop myself from just shoving food into my face and just trying to enjoy the food, trying to pay attention how it tastes, how it smells, and it really helped me. It was just different experience when you are eating very fast and you don't really even taste the food, to stop yourself and eat your food more mindfully. So I would say that it also helped me. And other things, and managing, for example, my lifestyle, sleeping better, and also managing my stress. So it's a whole it's not like when you have a problem with food, you don't deal only with food. You have to deal with many other factors.
Yeah, totally. And I mean that so first of all, I absolutely love that you said that you moved out. I know it sounds silly, like I moved out of my I'm sure your parents, if you moved to just a location that was very close to them, they're like, what are you doing? Why don't you just save money? But
Exactly. Yeah.
when
They
I was
didn't
looking
understand it.
I know they're like, yeah. When I was researching habits for the first time, a big thing was just to change your environment because you have triggers in place that, like, I just went home for the weekends and last weekend, and I didn't have a problem really with food when I was younger. And so I was in my parents' home, and like any urge to overeat just completely dissipated. Like
Yeah.
but then I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I come back here, and I'm like, oh, they're back. All right. But I'm better at managing them now.
Yeah.
And then let me see. Let me check my notes real quick because I know I'm getting on a tangent. So trigger foods and things like that. Because I think I love that you. A lot of people, and we can get into this because I know you have a different kind of philosophy about it. But intuitive eating, a lot of people think that when they're recovering from bulimia, they just need to eat like whatever, just as long as
Hmm.
they can eat. And to some degree, that's true. If you can eat without purging, if you can eat without binging, that's great. But a lot of foods like sugar and Oreos and whatever, they are highly addictive and
Yeah.
they really mess you up. So, how did you go from kind of cutting those foods out of your diet for a little bit, but then how did you slowly introduce them back in? And do you just have them in moderation? Because I'm sure with your partner around, you probably have them occasionally.
Hmm. Yeah, right now I do have them in moderation, but at the beginning, yeah, it's hard to say because it just came to me very naturally. We would just be eating together, and I would have a bite, and I would be just like, "Oh, I'm fine. I actually don't have a need to overeat on that." But sometimes when I had a very hard time, I think it was last year again, my mental health went a little bit downwards, and also I was in a very stressful job. I could feel those urges, and I have to admit that few times I would just overeat. It wasn't a binge eating, but I just felt like I'm full, but I would eat a little bit more, or just a bite of it, a bite of that. So whenever I'm stressed, I still feel the urges, but in my opinion, overeating is different than binge eating. But yes, definitely, whenever I make a choice to eat something less healthy, I am aware that later I may have a craving again because of the blood sugar dysregulation, or that those things were designed. I think that just being aware, um, it's very important, and it helps you to make a decision, because then I am taking responsibility of that decision. I'm not going to blame the food or the producer or whatever. Like, it's fine, we are just humans, we can eat that, but um, yes, at the beginning I would say that yeah, you have to be careful with eating those kind of food, definitely if you are suffering from some hormonal imbalances. If you have insulin resistance or leptin resistance because you are, for example, obese, or if you are suffering from PCOS, which is connected to insulin resistance, it might be difficult for you to eat intuitively, especially if you are eating processed foods high in sugar, high in fat, because your body will be full, but you won't receive that message. Your brain won't receive that message, because there is also insulin resistance in the brain. So you might want to just overeat on those things. So when somebody is recovering from bulimia or binge eating, you have to be careful with these concepts of intuitive eating. It might be tricky. It also depends what was the cause of your disorder in the first place, because I know that for some people they do have a very restrictive mindset, so for them it is important to let go of restriction and eat more of processed foods. But for example, in my case, restriction wasn't as that important in my recovery. As I said when I suffered from hypothalamic amenorrhea, I allowed myself to eat all of the foods, and actually eating more of them triggered binge eating. It wasn't other way around. So I don't think that restriction is problem for everybody. I know that most of people do restrict food, and that triggers binge or binge and purge, but it's not always the case, and we have to just be aware that those foods, those highly processed foods, are designed for us to overeat them, and we can see it in the society, um, because the obesity rates are rising in the whole world.
And I think if you're trying to eat in a healthier way, like there's a way to think about it that's not restriction. You know, a lot of people think I'm going to eat healthy and I'm going to cut out all bad foods so that I lose weight or this makes me a better person. And it's like, no, maybe you should think about it in the sense of I'm going to include these foods in my diet because I care about myself.
Yeah,
So
I call it inclusion versus exclusion mindset. So you have to just focus on the foods you have to include, because you want to nourish yourself. You want to be healthier. So you are focusing on getting more greens, getting more legumes into your diet, more nuts, and you are not focusing on what you want to limit. So I think that it's a very important mindset shift.
think that's awesome. Inclusion versus exclusion diet. Yeah, because when you start saying like, no, I can absolutely not have that, that's when maybe someone who's perfectly doesn't struggle with food, they're going to be fine. But for me, like the restriction really was what first triggered my problem, and a combination of just like low self esteem and depression, of course. Uh, so you mentioned that sometimes you still, though you'll still get urges, and I get urges too, for sure. It's just how my brain works. How do you manage those urges when you're stressed? It's maybe a worse day for you.
Yeah, I don't know. It all depends of the situation. For me, just I think reaching out for somebody, just saying, just maybe expressing my needs, like, asking yourself, stopping yourself and asking yourself, what do I actually need, what would be really effective and helpful, because if I'm gonna eat that, it's not really gonna help me, so I will, go do something else, do some alternative. I also went to a therapy, so I know a little bit better. I do have some like coping mechanism. I do have some kind of algorithm. What do I do if this is happening? If I get an urge, what do? I do this or this, or so I just have different coping mechanism which I try to choose. And if not, it's okay. I can eat a little bit more. If I really want to go watch Netflix and eat Ben and Jerry's, then it's fine. It's also fine for me right now. It is okay to get some emotional relief from food in moderation, but again, in moderation. If I feel that that I want to go overboard, I will stop myself, because at this point I can recognize that I'm actually not that this is going into a wrong direction. Therefore, I would just stop myself and ask myself, what else could I do?
Right. A big a big thing I notice is that if I'm in a rush to eat the food, unless maybe I'm really hungry, but if I feel fine and I'm like in a rush or frenzy to eat the food, then I know it's like time to slow down, time to take a breath and be like, why are you so anxious to eat this food? Or if I'm like standing in the kitchen eating, it's like, why can't you just take the time to sit down and eat the food? Like your
That's
emotions
also
using
a
it.
good indication. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Also, what's your? I know you're vegan still. So, what's your favorite flavor of vegan Ben and Jerry's ice cream?
Peanut butter. I'm
The
I'm a
Oreo
person
one.
who loves who loves peanut butter stuff. So yes, definitely peanut butter. Maybe on a second place would be like chocolate brownie. Yeah, those would be the two favorites.
I think right now I have the peanut butter Oreo one in my fridge or freezer,
Oh,
but I love their 7 layer Dream Bar one that's vegan. That one, oh, it's so
um,
good.
you know what? Here in the Netherlands, I think we have only 4 or 5 flavors, so I haven't tried that.
Oh, that's. I think we only have four. I think they only have 4 or 5 vegan flavors, as far as I
I
know.
I think that they have. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
You're like, I
We don't
don't
have
spend
that one.
time searching for Ben and Jerry's ice cream, but yeah, no, it's a good flavor. Um, so you mentioned hunger cues, and I kind of want to know. Obviously, you're eating more satiating foods and things like that, but I noticed for me, I would still want to eat out of habit. I would just be like, it's
Mhm.
been an hour. Why don't I just eat again? Because what else do I do? How did you start to relearn your hunger cues?
I think that we're just trying to check different macronutrient ratios, and also different volumes of food. I just had to find just this sweet spot, because I knew that, I don't know, eating 5 bananas won't be will be less satiating than eating some bananas with peanut butter. So I actually had to do those things, like just experimenting. And another thing is that I also noticed that certain stomach extension would also trigger an urge to binge. Like if my stomach would be too full, I would be like, oh, I probably already ate too much. Maybe I should just eat more. Like stupid thing. But so yeah, I would just have to remind myself that it's okay to eat, overeat, or to eat a little bit more, or to be bloated. Being bloated is nothing. It's not anything wrong. It's something which happens to everybody. So just also accepting how my body look after eating food. But yes, learning hunger cues, and when you are satiated, it's not easy. You have to just do a trial and error and see what works for you. I know that some people are satiated with the smaller portions. I know that for me, it actually works better if I eat, I don't know, 2 3 bigger meals a day. And I don't really like snacking, because if I would start snacking, I would be snacking all the time and grazing on food. So I know that everybody just have to find their own way of eating and what fits they best.
Yeah, snacking was a huge thing I had to cut out. And my whole life, even when I was younger and I didn't have a problem with food, I just labeled myself as a grazer. I was just like, oh, I just like snacking and I don't like actual meals. And then now I notice I'm a much more like I have maybe 2 to 3 meals a day. And then I have like a coffee in between and stuff like that. But the snacking for me really promoted, like I realized part of the time I was just snacking because I was bored or trying to entertain myself, or I it was just like an emotional kind of issue for me, and I had to get past that mindset of I'm a snacker to no, I sit down, I eat 2 or 3 meals a day, and that's what I do, and it saves you so much more time,
Yeah.
I think, and your body's not constantly digesting food, which once I really struggled from, IBS for a long time in college too, partly because I was just not treating myself well, but, that really cleared up once I started, just having a few meals a day, and because my digestive system had time to process things and relax. Yeah. What was one other thing I wanted to ask you? Oh, I also love that you said that if you overeat or something like that, you don't freak out. Can you go into were you ever like scared of food? Was there ever a moment where you were kind of like scared to be alone with yourself and food?
Probably no. Yeah,
Oh
I'm
no.
not sure. I know I'm
Well,
not sure.
the reason I ask that is just if you struggle with binge eating, a lot of times people with binge eating or bulimia, they'll have an overeat session or a binge, and then they will freak out and they'll make it seem like their whole day is ruined and it's the end of the world and they're never ever going to get better. Did you ever have any of that issue?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
definitely at my worst. Yeah, definitely all or nothing mentality. Yeah, beating myself up after a binge. Yeah, definitely. These kind of behaviors were apparent in me. But right now, no, because I started also observing other people, and I know that sort of like overeating is like it is sometimes even socially acceptable, during Christmas, during other celebrations, and nobody is hating themselves for the behavior. So even if I didn't like what I did because I ate a little bit too much, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or I'm ruined as a person. Yeah, I just over it, and it's nothing wrong, and I just have to move on with my life, and that's it.
So, so I'm really curious. I know you kind of explained it, but so the way that you got past that, all or nothing mindset of just looking to other people, basically, or was there any other thing that you did? Because it's really hard to go from where you're at now, or where you were to where you're at now. There's like a transitional period. Is there anything else you did to get out of that mindset?
Also, I think that just during the binge eating maybe slightly healthier food, I would say that it also helps with this guilt, because then you know that even though your stomach is huge and your belly is extended, then you know that at least you fed yourself like nourishing foods. Therefore, the guilt is slightly lower. I would say that it might be also helpful in accepting that this is okay because at least I fed myself some nutrients.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so one other thing, I'm sure we have plenty to talk about, but you mentioned a lot about self care and taking care of yourself and stress and sleep and things like that. How do you manage that on a day to day? Because a lot of people that I talk to, especially my clients, they don't take care of themselves, and I have to. It's partly because that they don't like themselves, so it's kind of manifestation of that. Like, why take care of yourself if you don't care about yourself? But how did you get to that place of maintaining yourself and taking care of yourself each day?
um my practice is built around sort of around habits, and I'm also talking a lot about breaking the binge habit because I am a person who builds habits quite quickly. So actually for me just taking care of myself was it started as just incorporating more routines into my day, and that was very helpful. I just understand how important is, I don't know, to regulate your circadian rhythm or to exercise, and I would do those things from other reasons. For example, to take care of my brain health, or to take care of my health in general, or to just live longer. So slowly but surely, I started to build up, this routines that help me to take care of myself. So of course there would be a days when I would feel worthless and I wouldn't want to do something, but because I had that routine, I would do it anyway, and then it would motivate me to do more. It would just lift up my mood a little bit. So I would just say people just start with something small, like a morning routine. You can have some morning journal, morning 5 minutes gratitude journal, and this is how it starts with a small steps. You also can have like a checklist, to-do list, and in this to-do list there should be some self-care practices, and you just try to do them as you, I don't know, as you go to school, or you have to do other things. We have to just realize that we have a body and we are responsible for that body, and if we want it or not, we just have to take care of it as you would take care of your pet. So even if you don't always feel like caring about yourself, you just have to remember that this is your responsibility, and you just sort of have to do it, even if at the beginning you don't like it. Because right now I just love it. I just love taking care of myself and developing more of my skills. So right now it comes easy to me, but at the beginning I must say that sort of I just force myself. I just try to build those routines into my daily life.
Right, because I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that you build habits really quickly, which is probably how you and a lot of other people came to bulimia or binge eating so quickly, is because they just really,
Yeah,
really, I don't want to say quickly again, but it just built hyper fast the habit of, oh, this food's good. But at the
yeah,
same time, if you could build that habit so fast, a lot of people forget that they can also break that habit pretty fast, and you can build new habits. Which and I love that you said to start with small things, which is something I really believe in too. Tiny habits are the way to go. You can't expect to go from 0 to 100. So,
yeah.
maybe it's just taking a shower every day, something as simple as that. But I mean, some people that I talk to, they're not doing that, and so it can be that small. And it's also interesting you said that it's your responsibility, which I think people can take that either way. But I like that idea. I like that it's your body, you're responsible for it, and don't feel bad about that. Just think, I have this body I can take care of, and it's like,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
right. Some people may take it in a bad way and start to punish themselves for not taking care of their body, like the
hmm
only responsibility. But yeah, I'm just trying to look at the brighter side, and this is something
yeah,
what motivated me. So I'm sharing that with other
yeah.
people.
Well, and you love it now, which is
Yeah,
amazing too. Like, think, yeah, it's a shame because people can't see. We're talking now and we're sharing our stories, but people don't see where we were at one point. And it's
yeah,
like, no, it was hard, and you do it anyway, and you kind of force yourself to do it. Once you get the ball rolling with
yeah.
anything, it gets easier and easier. And now you like look forward to these habits and taking care of yourself and building new things for yourself.
Yeah, I think that it is totally a snowball effect, because
Yes.
every time we do something good, we've got this dopamine, small dopamine hit in our brain, and that motivates us to do another thing. That's why it's important to have the small goals, because if we have one big goal, therefore we've got this dopamine release only once when we finally achieve that big goal. However, if we have a small goals, that every time we achieve that small little goal, therefore we've got some dopamine hit, and that motivates us even more. That's why I also mentioned the checklist. For me, checklists are very important, because I feel just proud of myself when I can just tick that I did something from my checklist,
I
to-do
mean,
list.
oftentimes we don't give ourselves credit for the things that we did. You
That is
know,
true.
yeah. Yesterday I did so much stuff, and I was very demotivated to do anything yesterday. It was just one of those days. And I was like, oh, I didn't get everything done. And then I look at my list, and I was like, you got like 80% of the things that you need to do done. I don't know why you're so being so mean to yourself. So I think having gratitude and appreciation for the things that you did that day is super important, and
Yeah,
reflecting on that.
yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you here forever. So I wanted to ask, obviously my audience, they are looking for tips on food and habits and things like that. Do you have anything else that you think that would be just like super useful for them to know about binge eating and how to get through it that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There are so many things that that I could say, and I'm not sure what would be the best thing to recommend. But I would just say maybe from the neuroscientific perspective, it just where our attention when our attention flows, then our when our attention goes there energy flows. So if we are all day focusing on food, on weight loss, on diets, therefore the more um, brain devotes more neurons to thinking about it. So the more we thinking about it, the more we strengthen the neural pathways responsible for thinking about it. So if you are struggling with food, with your relationship with food, maybe it would be good to take a step back from it and stop following people who do not serve you well on social media. Maybe stop watching another jumping from one diet to another diet, and just start focusing on other areas of your life. Maybe start focusing on your relationships, or on career, or on self development. Because if you feel right now that you cannot manage your food, you can still manage other things. You can take care of your yeah, as I said, you can take care of your sleep, of your relationships. So maybe focus on those things so that the energy flows there, and maybe the food problem will become slightly less important. And another thing is that the longer you wait, the harder it gets. So if you are struggling with food right now, reach out for help as soon as possible, because the longer you will wait, the harder it will be to get rid of those habits. Of course, it is possible. Brain is highly adaptable. It is
Mhm.
possible to rewire it, even if you've been struggling with bulimia or binge eating disorder for many years. But it would be just slightly harder. So if you are struggling with your relationship with food right now, it's best to act right away and just find a health professional who could help you.
Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to be a certain level of having issues to
Yeah,
reach out for help. And even if you're perfectly fine, I think I'm a big proponent of coaching or therapy or anything like that. I think having external guidance is so key. And there was also, oh man, my brain is blanking. um, what you said before about the fact that the more you focus on food, the more neurons your brain dedicates to it. That's what you said, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think that's brilliant advice because I tell people all the time, like, you need to focus on other things other than just food because it consumes your life, right?
yeah.
And
That
it's
is
like,
true. Yeah,
yeah, it's all you think about. And when I was struggling, everything else in my life was slowly falling apart. Like my relationships were falling apart because I thought that, I just had to be skinnier, which is so irrational. But I thought, if I just have this figured out, then I'll be a better
yeah.
person. And
You're
meanwhile,
postponing your life, right? Because
yeah,
you're waiting, like, oh, I will do this when I will lose weight. I will find a
mhm,
boyfriend when this and this happens. So
yeah,
we are constantly, yeah, postponing our life instead of enjoying it right now.
yeah, your life is right in front of you. And whether you are struggling with something or not, you need to focus on it. And finding other hobbies and
Yeah,
also social media. That's so important. I was following a bunch of people on social media that just made me feel horrible about myself. And every time I saw those pictures, I'd be like, I'm a failure. So
yeah,
controlling your environment to a degree of like making sure the stimulus that you're getting is helping you. I
yeah.
think that's
So true.
that's
Yes.
a lot of people don't do it. Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I think you're brilliant, and the listeners are going to get a lot of value from this. And again, Natalia's Instagram and website and YouTube channel will be below, so you guys can find her there. Is there anything else I want to say? Oh, how can people? Do you do coaching? Do people work with you?
Yes, right now I'm offering one-on-one 3 month coaching program for people with binge eating disorder. But in the future, I hope that I will I will be able to offer also online course about how to deal with binge eating. But for now, it's only one-on-one coaching. And of course, you can find out about that on my Instagram. You can DM me. Also, you can visit my website. And as it was said, the links will be in the show notes.
Yeah. And I will say Natalia's Instagram, guys, it's full of really nice, like every post of yours seems to have some sort of meaning to it, and it always gives away really valuable information. So I highly recommend following her. It's great. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Hey guys, I just wanted to touch base real quick. I hope that you enjoyed that interview. If you want to see more of Natalia, you can go to her Instagram. It's Binge Nutrition, and it's an awesome place to go find content. I really think she posts a lot of informative things and that hold a lot of value. So if you're looking for something specifically on binge eating, highly recommend you check her out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!